Ecology is the section of biology which deals with how organisms interact with each other and their environment. During this investigation, the population distribution of the rose barnacle in some rocky shores and how biotic and abiotic factors affect it was measured. Factors such as temperature, pH levels, and distance from the low tide mark were tested in a transect line. Rocky shores are where water meets the land, which makes it a cooking pot of different plants and animals. They're home to a lot of specific animals, as the constant waves and ever-changing levels of water and temperature makes it hard for a lot of animals to live in. An animal which can survive and use this environment is the rose barnacle. Barnacles are crustaceans which live on hard surfaces, such as rocks and boats, which can eat plankton and sometimes algae. They also live on whales and sometimes even turtles. They live wherever they can latch on and receive plankton through filter feeding them out of the water. pH levels of water has changed over the past years. This is because the levels of CO2 in the air has increased, and as a result, seawater has absorbed more and more CO2. This creates a reaction where pH decreases or increases. This reaction matters because a study of pH levels effects on barnacles states the bigger the difference from pH level 7, the weaker the shell of the barnacle. In this investigation, there should be an effect on the barnacle the bigger the difference from 7 from the pH levels. Water temperature that an average barnacle lives in is around 10 to 15 degrees Celsius. This is because this gives them more freedom for their appendage to eat plankton, as well as gives them more frequency for their food. This is because plankton loves living in temperatures around 10 to 15, and this temperature also increases their growing and birth rates. If the temperature is higher, this might collaborate with the percentage dead in the area. The goal of this experiment is to see what biotic and abiotic factors influence rose barnacles. The biotic factors and abiotic factors measured are water temperature, pH levels, and distance from the low tide mark. The materials used to test these factors were as such: a thermometer, a pH reader, measuring tape, and a quadrat. The method in which we tested these factors was as follows. Step 1. Gathered materials and equipment needed to test the factors. Step 2. Find a location with rose barnacles inhabiting it and lay the measuring tape from the low tide mark to the distance you feel necessary. This will be your transect line for the data taking. Step 3. Lay your quadrat on the transect line and take data for everything in that transect. Why? This makes it easier to section the data over that transect line. It makes it faster and easier to read the data as well as to distinguish the data in general. Step 4. Repeat step 3 till you reach the end of your transect line. Step 5. Once you complete the transect, make a new line on a different section of the rocky shore and repeat steps 3 and 4. Biotic and abiotic factors influence barnacles and where they live on the rocky shore. The distance in which barnacles live and are in the rocky shore has a recessive curve, which makes sense. Barnacles need a healthy balance of water and food where they reside. The closer they are to the shoreline, though, the closer they are to predators, which is why most found near the line were dead. It's hard to value which are dead and which are not, so it wasn't measured on the day. The amount seen at the shoreline is still relevant though, as that data piece shows the influence of water in where barnacles grow and live. The lower the water, the less barnacles. Simple. The pH value showed a downward curve in the data, which again lines up with the research. It was shown the higher the pH levels from 7, the less barnacles in the immediate area. The research shows that the higher the levels, the weaker the shell, which means that there's a negative effect the higher the pH from the base levels. The lowest pH level in the area was found to be around 8.4, when the barnacle's optimum level is around 7. This explains the deaths and downward curve, in turn shows how the barnacle is affected negatively by differing pH values. The temperature data showed that lower temperatures than found were ideal for the barnacle. The data graph had a recessive line, which implies that temperature is a factor that influences barnacles negatively when it is raised. The temperatures read on the day was higher than the ideal for the barnacle. This is probably because Australia has quite a tropical environment, meaning the water and temperatures in general are higher. This in such shows that the lower the temperature, the better for the barnacle. Overall, the factors measured all had an effect on the rose barnacle and where it lives on the rocky shore. The design of this experiment was logical, but in hindsight a couple of changes would be made if it were to happen again. The first immediate change would be some of the things measured. Competitors in the area would be measured to give more definition to the dataset, as you could compare the distance to the competitor ratio. This could show how important distance is to the survival of the barnacle. The pH readings were pretty good and worked well, as it showed how it affects the barnacle's position on the rocky shore. In comparison, though, the temperature readings are almost completely irrelevant, in the short term anyway. The readings would be needed to speak of the temperature effect of barnacles, the averages over an entire year, or at least a longer period of time. This is because there is little telling if the temperatures were either higher than usual on the day or lower than usual on the day. Comparing longer periods of time would give the comparison over time, obviously, as well as the number of barnacles over the year. Or in simpler terms, the population change and how it affects it, and temperature change and how it affects it. Overall, pH was done well, temperature was irrelevant, and distance could be better if the competitors were measured. The experiment is to see how biotic and abiotic factors influence rose barnacles. From this investigation, pH, distance, and temperature all affect rose barnacles. Particularly pH in the long term is shown to affect barnacles and where they are on the rocky shore. Distance most likely affects where barnacles are due to their food sources and predators, but they were not measured as they were an oversight. Temperatures from research has shown to affect barnacles, but short-term data doesn't really show what the research said. To find what the research said, you would have to measure over a longer period of time.